It's a real pleasure to be here. It's an honor to be asked to be here to present to you. I've never given a talk on this topic before. It's something new to me. So it's a little nerve-wracking, but also very exciting. You may not know this, but 6 years ago in 2010, myself and the Nagios team were here at Ohio LinuxFest. And at that point, we were just about 9 months into the launch of our first commercial product called Nagios XI. It was built around our open source Nagios project that many of you are familiar with. We were at a pretty critical stage, in our company. It was still super small. We had like 4 people, 5 people, half of which were part-time. And we were really kind of testing the waters, like, is this thing gonna work? Is this company gonna work? Now, 6 years later, we're just over 30 employees. I think we'll probably be closer to 35 by the end of this year. And with some of the things that are happening in Nagios and the opportunities that are available to us, I wouldn't be surprised if we hit 50 this time next year. So there's an incredible, growth potential in our company. It's super exciting. We're actually going through what I consider to be the second or even the third startup stage of our company. We're looking at things that we've got, opportunities that are available, things that we could be doing better, and kind of revamping things to take ourselves to the next level. So it's kind of an exciting place for us to be. I'm not talking about Nagios in a technical sense today. I'm talking about entrepreneurship, what it takes to be a founder, to start something that you could take from the idea phase and move it into a product or service that you develop that hopefully succeeds. And there are a lot of challenges along the way that you're going to run into. I'm going to share my experiences with Nagios and other things I've started and kind of give you some high-level information that if you're looking at starting something or revamping something you already have going, might hopefully be useful to you. And a lot of things about entrepreneurship aren't just about building a product, building a service, developing something that's commercial. A lot of the things about entrepreneurship apply to a lot of things in life. Whether you're trying to make a big decision in life, you're not sure what direction you want to go, or if you can do it. A big thing about entrepreneurship is it's all about believing in yourself and being willing to take a risk and put the work in to try something that you believe in, that you think is a possibility, that you think you can do, even though you're not sure if you have all the skills or the capabilities, or if you know everything you need to, or you might be in a place where you don't think you have the money to do it, and you don't know the outcome. If you're making a big decision in life, the future isn't known for any of us. Anything we start in terms of a project or a company, or when you're making a big decision in life, you don't know the outcome. Hindsight is 20/20. It's easier for us to look back, but you don't know, the outcome of anything that you start in life. So that's kind of the whole concept of being an entrepreneur. You're taking a risk, and you're trying something out. You're not sure if it's going to work or not, but that's the whole concept of it. I'll give you a little bit of my background story. My experience is in software mainly, either as a project with Nagios and open source, or commercializing that project, or I did some work in software services in the past. I'm not a hardware guy, so my experience is I know nothing about that world. I don't know about building hardware, building gadgets. If you asked me to start a retail business making clothing, I wouldn't know the first thing about it. I'd have to learn about it. So even if you're not interested in starting something that's tech, a lot of these concepts can still be applied to you, though. So a little bit about my background. I'm a tech by nature. I taught myself programming in high school. I got a CSI degree. I've had jobs doing anything from phone support on the IT help desk to Windows app development, web development, sysadmin, network admin stuff. So I've got a broad range of experience across the IT industry. I'm not an expert in any particular area, but I've got a broad range of experience, and I was able to leverage that in some of the things that I did. I actually started my first company when I was in college in 95. I was like, all right, I need to make some money. I don't have any cash in college. I want to start something new and see if I can, support myself. And I thought I had an idea that was just going to take off and it was going to be awesome. And it was an actual company. I learned how to sell. I learned how to do accounting, pay taxes. And at the end of the day, when I shut it down, I think I figured out I worked for about 50 cents an hour. So from a financial success standpoint, it was not successful. But I took a lot of the things I learned from that company and my work on it, and I applied that to future things that I did. The first monitoring application that I wrote, basically my intro to the monitoring world, which is what Nagios is about, actually happened about a year later in college. I didn't have any goals to build something that would, change an industry, or wasn't looking to build something that would bring in a lot of money. I had a real simple problem I needed to solve, and it was actually a social people problem that I was trying to solve. All I wanted to do was to be able to give myself and my fellow workers the freedom of being able to be out of the office, but know when a server crashed. So I wrote about a 200-line DOS application that just really simply pinged servers a couple times, and if they didn't work, I and my coworkers would get a simple numeric page enter pager. So that was my first invention, I guess, in the monitoring space. Nagios was first released as an open source project in 1999. I started building it in 1998 because I wanted to start a company that would offer monitoring services to local businesses, because I saw that a lot of small businesses, they didn't, and even in smaller companies, they didn't know the first thing about what it took to actually maintain the systems they had in place, and things break all the time. And I looked at the commercial solutions that were on the market, and they were too expensive for me to start actually using and start deploying in that business. And the free and open source stuff that was out there, I didn't like the way it was designed or the way it worked. So I decided to write my own application. Now at that time, I decided not to go ahead with the business idea. I didn't launch the business, but at that point I made the decision to release Nagios as an open source project and give it back to the community, because I had just discovered Linux and GCC. I thought it was great that I got a free C compiler, and I thought Nagios could be my contribution back to open source. Nagios was something I started that I didn't think was going to succeed, actually. I thought probably at most about a dozen people worldwide might be interested in it. And what happened with Nagios was amazing. It exceeded my wildest dreams with it. I mean, it performed much better than my 1995 business idea, where I was going to do so well. But it was an unexpected success. So some things that you start that you don't think would work out might actually work out for you in the future. I started my second company in 2003. At that time, I was looking to quit my day job, be able to support myself. I didn't want to work for the man anymore. I wanted to do my own thing and have more time to work on Nagios, which was a side project, and just be able to support myself. And I did that. It was fairly successful in that I was actually able to support myself, and at one point up to 2 part-time employees as well. So it was pretty small, but it was self-sustaining. And that worked out well for a number of different years. I did a variety of different things in there, but the first thing that I launched that company with, I had this idea. It was a $1 million idea, or at least I thought. And I spent a lot of time building a service that actually very few people actually wanted. So I made the mistake of building something that there wasn't a market for. So after about a year, I shut that down, and I started to focus on things that were related to Nagios consulting, advertising, and eventually in 2007, I formed Nagios Enterprises to officially kind of commercialize the Nagios project and bring that under the Nagios name. So Nagios Enterprises is what I have most of my successful experience with, but I have learned from failures in the past, and I applied the lessons I learned when I actually built Nagios Enterprises from the start. So the company itself got its roots in some advertising. I was doing website advertising on the Nagios website, and I was commercializing Nagios in the sense that I was offering consultation and implementation services for Nagios users, and I did a lot of deployments, help people, optimize their configuration, or help them get it up and running. And I asked them a lot of questions, and I heard a lot of their feedback about Nagios and what they were looking for. And what I did is I said, okay, everybody's kind of asking for the same thing. They want something that has more features, that's easier to use. And I kept track of all those things that people were asking me for. And I got to a point in 2009 where I decided, look, it's time to build this product. And the decision that kind of spurred me on to build that commercial edition of Nagios was actually, the work that I had been doing with consulting and stuff kind of slowed down. I reached a point where, I only had about 4 or 5 months worth of financial reserves left, and I was at a point where I was either going to be homeless or I'd have to go get a real job. And I didn't want either of those things to happen. So I decided I'm going to try this thing. I'm going to build the first commercial edition of Nagios. I want to see how this works because I think it has potential. I think I made that decision probably mid-September 2009. And I gave myself the goal of getting that product out the door and launched by the end of the year. And I did it. But it was New Year's Eve 2009 that I was posting that, hey, this is the version 1.0. So I just barely got it out the door. I met my goal though. Those 3.5 months were tremendously, they were busy, they were really stressful. I was working 100-hour weeks for those 3.5 months, and it was exciting. There was a lot of energy. I had to learn a ton of new stuff. Not only in product development, but I really didn't have any idea on how to sell a product, how to market a tech product. I had to revamp the websites, build sales and marketing material. I had to set up an e-commerce system and set up essentially a support infrastructure. And I was the only guy that could do that. I didn't have the money to hire somebody else to help me. So I had the time, but I didn't have the money. So I had to do it. And it was an incredible experience. I remember during the dot-com boom in around 2000, I'd read about the software startups in Silicon Valley, and I'd see the photos, of like the devs sleeping in their sleeping bag on the office, floor, and I was like, that is so cool. I wish I could be a part of that. That energy that it takes to actually create something new and get it out the door. I had the opportunity to do that in 2009. I'm glad I did it. I don't really ever want to go back and do that again, that same way again. In the future, I hope to have more money than time and be able to hire people, bring in a team and say, let's do this together. But I got it out the door, and that really launched our commercial success. We were able to do things like get our first office, because I was working out of the basement at the time, and start to hire employees. At the end of 2010, I set a goal for the company that I wanted us to hit $1 million in sales that first year, because I felt that it was a good guidepost that would say, hey, you guys are on the road to success. And we just came in, we just hit the mark by the end of the year. It was almost exactly $1 million, and I was like, yes, we did this. Something worked right. And now, a couple years later, we've been succeeding. We've continued to succeed and continued to grow. We're currently over 30 employees, as I said, and we've got a great amount of potential ahead of us. So, there are a lot of things that are happening for us in the future, and I'm, kind of involved in the process to kind of revamp the company and allow it to continue to grow. There are a lot of challenges that we faced as we've grown from a one-person shop to a 5-person to 10 to 20 to 30, and we're going to have to change some things up too to make it to 50 or 100 in the future. So those are the kind of things I'm looking at, and I have the energy and the excitement that I do now about making those changes that I did when I first rolled out that first commercial product. So it's pretty exciting. A lot of things I've learned I'd like to share with you, because whether or not you're starting, you want to start a company, you want to start the next Facebook or the next Uber or whatever it is, or maybe you already have a business, you have a company, maybe it's just a side gig that you do part-time, that you use it to support yourself, generate some extra income. Hopefully something in here will be informative to you. You'll be able to make use of it. That'll help inspire you to take it to the next level if that's what you want to do. So first I want to talk about some things that I think are important to entrepreneurs in general, how they think, the way they work. So one of the really important things I think is you have a couple key qualities that are really important. One is, as an entrepreneur, you need to be willing to take risk. And there are a couple types of risk. there's risky behavior, which you want to avoid, and there's calculated risk. So the difference between the two is this. If you quit your job without knowing what your next job is going to be, that's risky behavior. You set yourself up on the road to financial calamity. But if you quit your job because you already have your next job or your next gig lined up, that's a calculated risk that you can make. And as an entrepreneur, you want to take calculated risks. You don't want to engage in risky behavior. You also have to be willing to face up to the fact that you are not always going to succeed. Everybody wants everything that they do to be smashing success, but that's not life. Everybody has failures, things don't work out like you think they're going to. But if you're an entrepreneur, what you need to do is look at the failures and the setbacks that you have and take the lessons from those things and apply those things to the future things that you do, either in your existing company, the way you work, or in the next company effort, whatever it is that you launch. You need to learn from your past mistakes. Don't get in a place where you just feel like you've felt and you don't want to start something new. You have to pick yourself up and move beyond that and grow as a person. You also have to be somebody who can get things done on your own. If you need somebody else to motivate you, you're not really going to be good as a founder, because on day one, unless you have a lot of money and you can bring in a team of people to do the stuff that you want to do for you, you've got to do it yourself. So you have to be motivated to be able to learn the technology, how to build a product, how to support a product, how to sell, how to market, how to provide support. You might be a specialist right now, you might be a really good developer, but you might not know anything about selling stuff or how to market. And as an entrepreneur, you need to be able to figure that out. And you need to take the first steps, you need to learn. It's a constant learning process. There are things I know now that I didn't know 12, 13 years ago, that I didn't know 2 years ago. But there are a lot of things that I don't know. Right now, I don't know how to take the company to a point where it's 500 employees or 1,000 people. I don't know how to take it to a point where we could launch an IPO because I don't have the experience. You constantly have to learn as an entrepreneur, and everybody here, you're technical, you've had to learn a lot of stuff to get to where you are. So that's not a new concept to you. You're just gonna have to branch out and get out of the tech box that you might be in. You also have to be somebody who knows how to take all the ideas that you and other people have. I mean, there are ideas all around us. Everybody knows that. But you have to be able to take an idea and to say, okay, what are the pros and cons of this idea? And to nurture that a little bit and say, okay, what could I do with this? What do I need to be able to get there? You have to open it up to critical criticism, and let people, hear about your idea, but you got to protect it at the same time. You have to be able to build that idea into a vision, into a goal, and then actually start working on it. And building, what you need to do to get to that goal. And it's also important that you're a jack of many trades. This gets back to you need to do a lot of stuff when you're small. It might be just you, it might be you and one or two other people, but as a team or as just yourself, you have to do a lot of different things, and you've got to learn a lot of different things. So being flexible on that and being open to learning things that you don't know already is super important. Why I think you guys in this audience would make good entrepreneurs. One, I'm a tech, and I feel like I make a good entrepreneur, so you guys are techs, I feel like you guys would too. So, but techs in general, I mean, you guys are specialists of some kind. You're either a web developer, you're a sysadmin, you're a network admin, you've got some specialty area that you kind of focus on, and you've learned a lot to get there. So you know a lot about that market. You are also intimately aware of the things that you and your coworkers wish you had in terms of software, services, hardware, whatever it might be. So you're an industry insider. You know what kind of opportunities are available for services, for products that aren't available right now. So you've got an inside look, you know what the opportunity is, and you also have the technical ability to build that. And all you need to do is basically take action. Like I said, there are a lot of things you might not know right now. That's okay. You can learn that along the way as long as you're willing. If you want to get started on something, if you haven't started something yet, most people, how many people in here have actually started their own gig? They've got their own company or part-time job? All right, nice job. Kudos to you, because I know it takes a lot of work to pull that off. For those of you that are interested in it, there's some things I've got as recommendations. I mean, a lot of people think about starting something new, like a new business. They've got ideas, but a lot of times it comes down to self-doubt. They don't feel like they can do it. They don't think like it would work out. But somebody told me that life is not chance, it's choice, which means if you want to do something, you need to make the choice to do it. Where you're at right now, your skill set, your industry, wherever you're at in life is a result of the choices you've made up to this point. So if you want to be someplace in 5 years, 10 years, you have to make a choice right now as to what you need to do to actually get there. So one of the big things that I think is important to get started and to continue to build your company, your product, your service, whatever it is that you want to build, is to get inspired and stay inspired. And obviously, you're not inspired the whole time. There's mundane, boring work you got to do. There's setbacks. But getting inspired, believing that you can do it is I think, vitally critical to any kind of new endeavor you undertake. One of the things that I did, and I would recommend, is that you look at successful companies, what they did to get started, and how they launched products successfully, and look at their failures too. We all have examples of companies that failed or product lines that failed. Learn from what they did and apply those things to yourself. Even though you're not the scale of an IBM or a Microsoft or a Facebook, you can take some of the things that they did and apply those principles to whatever endeavor you're going after. I think it's really critical to listen to and read about the early days of companies. So, I mean, Google is, for example, it's huge. I mean, I'm sure it's far exceeded the original vision of the founders. But on day one, it was just two guys. It was really small. Facebook started out of a dorm room. The Facebook of today probably wasn't in Mark Zuckerberg's mind on day one when he launched it. So you never know what's going to happen. But to get from one person in a dorm room to a company the size of Dell, you've got to do a bunch of different things. And the decisions those founders made in the early days when they started the direction of the product or the direction of the company was critical in determining whether that company and those product lines would succeed or fail. So I think it's really critical to pay attention to the early days, because if you mess up in the early days, it can spell disaster. You can make mistakes when you're bigger. You can have a complete product line fail if you're the size of IBM. You can absorb that. But when it's just you or a couple people, you can't afford to make huge mistakes. You can make little mistakes. Calculated risks is what you want to take. You don't want to engage in risky behavior. So you want your mistakes to be as small as possible, and you can contain those instead of having them just take you down. These two posters are actually framed in my office at Nagios. I looked to the tech industry for inspiration, but I also looked elsewhere. I mean, anything that you find inspirational can help you through. I found, I only know like 6 songs from Eminem, but when I watched the movie, I was so inspired. It's like this guy, he came from having nothing, nobody believed in him, but he believed in himself, and he built an incredible empire. And to me, that's inspiring, and things like that can hopefully inspire you. Everybody knows the story of Rocky, somebody who overcome great odds to be someone great. Obviously, it's fiction, but the real life stories, I think, are especially the important ones. So these two movies about the start of Apple and the start of Facebook, when I watched these, I was like, yeah, this is cool. This is, it's a romanticized version of what happened back then, but it still shows you that a guy in a dorm room, some guys in a garage, can do something that other people would have said you're crazy, you could never do it. You didn't have the resources, the money, the team, and they made something happen. I always try to take a look. I don't really watch movies like these as a movie viewer. I kind of put myself in them. So if you've seen the Jobs movie, the first 3 minutes of that movie, Steve Jobs is portrayed. He's walking into the auditorium, and he's introducing his team at Apple to the iPod. which is about to revolutionize the industry. And I don't just watch that as a movie goer, I picture myself that I'm there. I'm actually in the auditorium, I am an employee of Apple, I'm on the design or engineering team, or I'm Steve Jobs. And just, it's capture the excitement of being there where you're about to do something incredibly awesome. Even if what you're doing or what you want to do isn't that same scale. All you might want to do is start a part-time gig doing web development, or you're helping people install their WordPress sites or something. But you can use inspiration from different places to help launch you and get you through the tough times. One of the books I would recommend for the tech industry, there's a book called Founders at Work. Great stories where the author interviews the people that actually started some very great companies that we are all familiar with. So the early stories of how PayPal and Yahoo got started and the early decisions that were made, I think are really inspiring. To be honest, I never actually finished this whole book. I got about 2/3 of the way through, and I was so inspired, I was like, I'm gonna stop reading and I'm gonna start building something. So I'd highly recommend it. So you need to get inspired. You also, I mentioned this before, you need to be able to take ideas, figure out which ones are viable, and take those to a place where you can actually start building on them. You got to be able to open them up to criticism from other people, but you don't want other people to destroy your ideas and crush your dreams. It's a fine line between getting that external feedback and actually protecting your idea and believing in yourself that you can do it, but you don't want to do something that's not viable. So it's a tough balance. There's not an exact science to how to do it, but you need to be able to figure out a way to do that. And then you need to be able to take that idea to a place where you can develop a vision for what you want to do with it and start to build goals and a business plan. If you haven't started a business before, for techs, don't spend a ton of time building a business plan. I didn't know what I was doing when I started, my company in 2003, and leading up to 2007 with Nagios Enterprises, I was like, okay, well, best practices say I need to have a business plan. I don't know how to write one. I don't know what one looks like. I've never been interested in starting a company, managing a company. So I read a lot about it, and I'm like, geez, I don't want to spend all this time writing a 50 or 100-page business plan that actually I'm just kind of making up right now because it's just me. And how am I supposed to say we're going to be this in 10 years? You can't do that. I'd recommend, if you start out, you need to have a rough plan of what you need. But all you need to do is figure out what it is that you want to do, what you have right now in terms of money, people, resources, and the first things that you need to get things out the door to start to succeed. You can change your business goals, the plan, the vision along the way. Nothing that you start out today is going to be what you think it's going to be 5 or 10 years on the line. It's just not realistic, especially when you're starting out. So don't spend too much time on it. You need to have a plan, but you need to start working and building that thing. You also need to get over some fears. So as I mentioned, nobody wants what they do to fail. I didn't start the company in college thinking that it was going to fail. I wanted it to succeed. So you have to get over the possibility that something you do is not going to work out. A lot of people don't want to start something because they're afraid of of what they'll look like to their family or friends if things don't work out. You have to get past that fear. Everybody has failure. You also potentially, I had to do this too, I had to get over fear of success, because success would have changed where I was in life at the time where I was planning to do something on my own. And I had concerns about what would people think about me if I succeeded. And I had to get over those fears of success. So it's not just fears of failure that you need to deal with, it's fears of success as well. I mentioned your ability to take risk. Your willingness to take risk is largely based on how secure do you feel. A good example of this is financial freedom. So back in 2000, 2001, I was, feeling the crushing weight of student loan debt and credit card debt. And I worked on the side to generate money to get myself out of debt and to build myself up where I had a couple months worth of reserve where I could get to a point of security And I said, now I can quit my day job and I can start something new. And I've got a certain amount of time that I can support myself to see if this thing's going to work. I was single at the time, so it was just me. I knew that I could eat spaghetti or ramen or whatever it took to actually stretch my money as far as I could. If I was married, if I had kids, my risk tolerance at that point would have been different. So your risk tolerance and your willingness to take risk in the future is obviously dependent on where you are in life. Before you launch anything, I wouldn't suggest that you just say, hey, I'm going to quit my job, I'm going to start something, and then I'll learn how to do it. I would highly suggest you start researching everything you need to know about getting that thing that you want to do built, designed, ready to go before you actually leave your place of security, your day job, whatever it is. Learn everything you can about business plans, about how to sell, how to market, how to develop that product or solution that you want to do. Early days, when you get started in something, whether it's just you and you just want to support yourself on a consulting thing, you want to do be your own boss, or you want to build something bigger, you're probably not starting with a whole lot of money. And this is the time-money trade-off that I talked about. I didn't have very much money when I started any of my businesses, but I had the time and I was willing to learn. So you've got to do all the work. You've got to do a lot of hard work to get your product, service, whatever it is, launched. And despite what society is starting to say sometimes, nobody owes you anything. You are not entitled to anything. If you want success in this life, you have to reach out, take the opportunities that are available to you, work your butt off to get there. Somebody told me a couple years ago, they said, you're lucky with the success of Nagios. It was luck. And I said, to them, I said, as they say, luck is just the intersection of opportunity and preparation. Nobody handed me a successful project. Nobody handed me a successful business. I had to do a lot of work to get it to where it is today and to get it launched. I just saw an opportunity. I saw a need, for example, to monitor networks, and I said, I'm going to do something. I'm going to take action. I'm going to learn how to do this. I'm going to learn how to actually launch a company. I'm going to learn the rules that you need to follow when you hire an employee, and all the taxes and the regulations and all that stuff that you got to go through when you actually start a company. Nobody handed that to me. It takes a lot of work. So you have to be willing to do that work. One thing that's really important, I think, I've been a developer for a number of years, so it's like everybody wants the thing that they put out there to be the best that it possibly can be. They want a bug-free, perfect application with all the features on day one. That's not realistic for any kind of product rollout. And if that's your goal on day one, you're setting yourself up for failure because you're taking too long to build your product, and it might not be what your customers want. So this is sort of the minimum viable product idea. You build something, a product, a service, that just has enough features, enough quality, enough of what your customers want to get it out the door, and then you got to focus on how you sell that to them, how you do the marketing. You can refine your product over time, you can improve it based on customer feedback, but you need to get just enough of a working product out there. You can use that concept, all the time, whether you're developing a marketing plan in your company. Some people, they want to sit down and they want to create the ultimate plan for what the next year is going to look like for a marketing effort or a sales effort or the product roadmap. And realistically, you'll spend a lot of time planning, not enough time doing and actually testing your ideas. A lot of that planning is going to be wasted. So don't wait for perfection. Just get something workable and get it out the door. And then you got to focus on how do you sell it to people, because the purpose of anything is you want it to succeed, and part of success is financial success. So you might not have experience in selling, but you need to figure out how you're going to sell that product to people. I didn't know how to sell stuff. I used examples from other companies to figure out how to do it and how to get things rolling. And that's kind of what you need to do. As a founder, especially if you're a one-person, two-person shop, it's really important. If you want that company to grow, you need to document all the important things that you do. Because eventually, if you succeed and you start to hire people, People need to have things that they're assigned to do. And there's some complicated things sometimes in the organization that need to get done in a very predictable, repeatable manner. You need to document all the important systems. Obviously, as techs, you know the value of documentation, of knowledge bases, whatever it is, that still, you need to apply that to a business and document all the important things, how to take an order, what it is that you say to a customer when they call up. Simple things like that, if you document those important things, it makes it easier to hire people on and grow your company. And whatever you're working on, you need to do, this is the minimum viable product concept again. You take the shortest possible path to getting things done, to success. So one example, when I was building Nagios XI, which is our first commercial product in 2009, I was at the same time rebuilding the websites. I was deploying a support infrastructure, figuring out, okay, I've never written, would never had like a product feature sheet or a price list sheet. Never had a reseller program. I never had case studies to show companies who weren't familiar with Nagios the value of it and why they should use it. So one of the things I did, I'm like, I don't have time to write a case study because I'm developing software. I'm trying to get this thing out the door. I need to sell it. So what I did is I actually I looked at what Oracle had on their website for case studies, and I looked at the PDFs that they had, and I looked at the content that was in them. I looked at how that content was laid out, and I said, okay, this is what I want the case studies to look like for Nagios. So we're going to use this on day one. I also had a challenge where I didn't have the time to go out and actually do a real case study with somebody, because that takes somebody in corporations, they want everything to be approved. It's got to go through an approval process. And I knew I didn't have the time to wait for approval to get a case study back. But I knew what I had some testimonials from Nagios users saying, hey, we love Nagios, it's doing a great job for us. So I reached out to a couple of those people and I said, let's do a success story. Let's not call it a case study, let's call it a success story. Because maybe that'll bypass some of the corporate approval that's required to actually get this thing published. And that actually worked. And because their corporate managers said, okay, it's not a case study, sure, it's more like a testimonial. All of a sudden I had success stories that I could use for basically purposes of selling. People who came to us and said, hey, we just heard about Nagios, we know nothing about it, what can it do for us? I could give them that success story that showed them that a bank or some other kind of enterprise organization used it successfully to save money, time, and improve things. So that was a short path to success in getting a case study done. That's one example of that. This is, I thought I'd share this. This is a motivational poster. This is how I look at it as motivational. I bought this a couple years ago. You can actually get these from startupvitamins.com. To me, it says, you're here for a purpose, you're here for a reason. We're working together towards something, so we don't have a lot of time. We're always strapped for resources. Let's make the most of our time here, do the best job we can, and make things happen. In order, Apple had the tagline, make it happen. In order to make it happen, you need to get stuff done. So this is just one, things like this can kind of make startup environment a little bit fun. A book I would really highly recommend for anybody looking at starting something is a book called Work the System. I picked this up because of the tagline. I thought it was great. I'm like, the simple mechanics of making more and working less. I'm like, ooh, I want that to be me. First half of this book is about, I almost stopped reading because the first half of the book is all about how do you set your business up to work like a franchise, like a McDonald's. And I was like, okay, I'm starting a software company. I don't franchise software companies like they do fast food restaurants. This doesn't apply to me. But if you continue reading, the author, the whole purpose of the book and the concepts behind franchises is they document everything that's super critical. One thing, if you think of when you go to McDonald's anywhere in the US and you order a #1 combo, you always get the same thing and you get it fast. So there's consistency and there's efficiency. Some would say there's quality too. I think that's, we can argue that, but you always get consistency and efficiency, right? And so those are some key things in thinking about a business and how to design a business like a system, like a network, like an application. Because there are a lot of similarities, even though you might not think about it right now. There are a lot of similarities in the way business works as to how a system works. an application, a network, whatever it is. The whole concept of this is take the critical processes in your business and document them. So one of the things that we do in Nagios, when somebody buys one of our products, there are about 10 steps that need to be handled. License keys get generated, stuff gets entered in the accounting system, an email gets sent to the customer, they get access to a support forum, whatever it is. There are about 10 critical steps. And early on, I'm like, okay, I'm doing this right now, but I need to hire somebody to basically take over order fulfillment. So I'm going to document every single step, everything that's required to get through, the whole process done, and then we can use that to hire people. And we've been able to bring on people to do that job in that instance very easily because everything is documented. 2 or 3 years ago, I don't know, people must have been out of the office, and I actually had to take and handle an order, and I'm like, I haven't had to do this in like 4 or 5 years. I don't even remember how to do it. But I opened the procedure sheet, the process documentation, and I was like, oh yeah, step 1 through 10, I can do it. So it's all about making your business efficient. It's something I'd recommend. As you start to get bigger, obviously it's, hiring the right people is just, it's so hard to do. We have an awesome team at Nagios. They always say like hire slow, fire fast. That's not the way it works in reality, because when you're looking to hire somebody, it's because you have a need, you're excited to bring somebody on the team, and you want to get that position filled. And then when things don't go right with somebody, generally you want to give them another chance. You want to allow them to get better. But it's really critical to try to hire the right people. And if you're starting something out, be involved in the hiring process. I think we've only hired or interviewed 2 people when I was out of the office, and I wasn't there in our interviews, but every other person, every position that we've interviewed, I've been there in the interview. I've asked them, the applicant, questions. I think it's really critical because if you're the founder, if you started something, you have a vision for where you want the company to go or the endeavor to go, whatever it is. You want to really know what the people have in terms of skills and also the way they think. To make sure you're getting the best people. It's really interesting. Sometimes people will apply for a specific position in our company, like marketing or sales, and I'll be, talking with them in the interview, and I'm like, all right, you're really not right for sales or marketing or support, but you'd be really great over here. Or, you've got a skill set that we hadn't even thought we needed, but we're going to hire you because that's what's going to help take us to the next level. So be involved in that. There are going to be some problems, challenges that you run into when, as a company grows, if that's what you want to do and if it's successful. Obviously, it's, communication in a company with 5 people is super easy because you're in the same room and you're like, hey, can you help me get this done? Can you take care of this? When you're 20 or 30 people, it gets more difficult. One of the things we had to do to help with scaling issues, a year ago, we rolled out HipChat internally because our support, our dev teams were, separated now. We have a bigger office space, and the sales and marketing team are in a whole different wing, and so communication was an issue, and so that's why we rolled out HipChat. That's one of the things we had to do to help us scale. As we grow right now, we're at a point where we've relied on distinct teams in the past, where we have a distinct sales and marketing team, dev, and support. But now we're kind of moving towards more work groups where there's a group that focuses on a particular area, whether it's product development or roadmaps or a marketing, efforts. That's one of the things we're changing up in order to be able to grow to the next stage, to get to 50 people, for example. Communication is a huge thing, actually. I mentioned this with HipChat, but it's a huge thing as you continue to grow. We're all people. People, we all have issues. I have issues, you have issues, everybody has issues. Communication and people stuff is hugely important in any company, especially when you're small and you're getting started. At some point, hopefully whatever it is that you've started gets to a point where it's successful. And there are different measurements for success. One measurement is you're generating some extra side income, or you're able to support yourself full time. You're able to quit your day job and do your own thing. Or you hit a certain financial benchmark or revenue benchmark, like we hit $1 million in 2010. That was a benchmark of success for us. Whatever that level of success is, you have to judge that for yourself. And there are multiple, points where you feel like, okay, we met the next level of success. But when you get to that point, at some point, you end up with an issue. If you're the founder of something, I've had to go through this myself, At one point or another, you had to do most of the things that you did on day one because it was only you or maybe one or two other people. And at some point, you've gotten to the point where you've hired people, brought them on staff, and they're kind of doing all the things that you used to do. So you might get to a point where you're like, okay, what is my purpose here? I don't take care of the systems anymore. I don't do development anymore. I'm not involved in support or development, whatever it is. And you get into this thing, it's like, well, what should I do? The thing that a founder is you're the architect. You have the vision. You've got an idea of what you want your company to be. And so you have to move into working on the company, not in the company doing development, doing support. I still do that stuff. It's fun to actually get my hands on different stuff and do development or do marketing. I think that's fun. But it's important that you work on the company, figuring out how should the company be structured, how do teams work together, how do you get things done in the most efficient manner. So you're the architect with the vision. There's a lot of stuff that can go wrong in any new endeavor. Everybody has setbacks in life or in businesses that they start. So, things go wrong, and we all know that. There are a lot of challenges here. There are too many to actually talk about. There are too many great things, too, to talk about. Being an entrepreneur, to me, is the most challenging and the most rewarding thing I've ever done. I didn't think I could do it. I wanted to do it, even back in college. But part of me felt like I couldn't do it, but I was eventually able to get over that and start doing things. You're gonna have plenty of these moments where you're just like, what was I thinking? Why did I say that? Why did we launch this product? Why did things go this way or that way? You just gotta move beyond that. You just have to learn from experience and just continue to improve, just like everybody does. I want to talk about open source and entrepreneurism. Since this is a Linux Festival conference, there's huge potential in open source. One is a lot of companies, we do this too, we leverage open source as our stack. I'm not talking about a LAMP stack, I'm talking about a stack in general. Because you might roll out a service or solution of some kind that utilizes the underlying components in open source. You guys know how easy it is to leverage, to customize, whether it's the operating system, the applications, the programming languages, whatever it is. You can use all those components as your stack when you're building your product, your solution, whatever it is. We actually, in Nagios, we utilize an open core model for our business. So we've got a commercial front end and capabilities that are built on top of open source components underneath the hood. One of the components we use is Nagios Core, the same thing that is available to the open source community. We have a lot of open source stuff underneath the hood. And a lot of glue that makes everything work together, but that's a model you can use. You can build a product around open source. If you are a lead developer of an open source project, there are a lot of options that are available to you. This is where I came from. If you started something in open source and you've got a project that you're maintaining, you are an entrepreneur. You just haven't generated any money yet. But you took a risk, you put the time in, you have a product out on the market, and your clients, your customers, are the people using it right now. They just haven't paid you for it yet. And they might not ever buy anything from you, but you've proven a product in the market. You've proven that somebody wants that widget, that application that you built. So if you're in the position, you have a lot of advantages to you that the people that use your product, they're your initial, they're the early adopters. They're the people that not only help to improve that, your project, but they're potentially your initial market too. If you can offer them something more, maybe a commercial add-on or services around your project. I started out this way, offering consulting and support around Nagios Core. I didn't have a product that I had built on top of it, so you can do that as well. So a lot of options for open source people. Even if you're not a project lead, if you're a developer and you're really familiar with WordPress, you can start a side gig offering commercial WordPress add-ons, for example. And that's how you can get your start. You can generate some revenue on the side and get started, and maybe eventually launch a full-blown web dev shop down the road. So you never know where things are going to go. Some key things that I would recommend: you should ask before you build the ultimate product. You don't want to build something that nobody wants. I made this mistake before. at one of the companies I started. I thought I was building something awesome. I didn't ask for input. I built the wrong thing. There wasn't a market for it, or it was at the wrong time, or I didn't know how to sell or market, whatever it was, it didn't work out. But a big key, I think, to previous failures is I didn't ask what people wanted. And for Nagios, when we launched Nagios XI, I took all the suggestions and the wish list essentially from my consulting clients, asked them what they wanted in a commercial solution, and I put all those things into our commercial product. And actually, it saved money for people like that who are coming to me for consulting because they'd hire me for consulting. They said, we want a better UI, we want easier config, and I install different components for them and set it up, and it's like they get the consulting bill, and it actually costs more than what we sold our product for. We actually launched our product, the first version, because I was like scared. I'm like, I need to start selling. It's got to sell to prove to me that somebody wants it. We sold it for under $500, perpetual license, and you got a year's worth of support, and I was the only guy supporting it. But I was like, okay, we can sell for $500. Competing solutions in the market go for $5,000 to $10,000 or more. I'm just going to get out the door and do something. Focus, obviously, you got to sell it, otherwise it's not viable. One of the things that's important is emulate the successful companies. I mentioned that I use Oracle as an example for case studies, but I also looked at, our commercial software doesn't have an open source license. It's a proprietary license. I didn't know how to write one. So I looked at the licenses and the agreements from Apple and Dell. And I said, okay, these are really good ideas for what should go into a commercial license. And I employed those things in a license. I short-circuited a lot of work that I otherwise would have to do myself by just looking at highly successful companies. And as I mentioned, you don't need to do something that's the next Facebook. It can be something small, start part-time. Don't quit your day job without having your next gig lined up. And you can do it part-time. It's really important to get started slow. Just overall, just to know it's possible. And a lot of the successes in life that we see that we take for granted took an incredible amount of courage to actually launch and a ton of work to actually bring it to you, where it's actually a viable product or solution. It's incredibly, it's awesome when you see companies like SpaceX launch a rocket, whether that rocket crashes or takes off. But just, you think about at some point, they didn't have rockets and stuff sitting around there. Actually, a few people probably sitting around a table going, we should start a space company. That's not a small endeavor, but they managed to get there. Dell came out with an ad commercial about 2 years ago that I thought, when I saw it, I'm like, this is so inspiring. This captures the essence of what it feels like to be able to look back and know that something really cool was started basically from nothing. And I want to play it for you here. It probably doesn't constitute fair use, but I'm going to say it's educational because it's a good example of good marketing. But it inspires me, and it's a great example of you can go from an idea or working in the basement, working in the dorm room, working in the garage, and build something really cool. So I'm going to play that, and hopefully the audio will work here. Whenever I see that ad, I'm like, yeah, that's what it feels like. And it's a good example of brilliant marketing on the part of Dell. They're like, hey, we came from nothing. We came from a dorm room, and now we're this huge company. And I watched this, and I'm like, yeah, we can do this. And I actually use stuff like this or other movies or whatever it is to get inspired, not only when I'm starting something new, but when I've gotten to a point where it's like, okay, we need to revamp, rework things and do something new. And stuff like this, the inspiration for doing something can come from anywhere. It just helps you launch and get to where you want to go. As I mentioned before, life is not chance, it's choices. You have to determine your destiny, what you want to work on. Everybody wants to start something new. Not everybody wants to be an entrepreneur. That's okay. But if you've been thinking about it, seriously consider it. I know there's a lot of work and a lot of worry that goes into, okay, how do I leave the financial security of where I'm at right now and do something new? But the way I kind of look at it is, when I'm 80 or 90 years old and I'm looking back at my life, what do I want to say that I accomplished or that I tried? Do I want to say, I wish I had done this? I wish I had tried to launch a company, tried to do whatever, travel, whatever it is. Or am I glad that I tried it? Some things I tried worked, some things were successes, some things failed. I would rather have taken the chance and the opportunity to do different things. So anyway, I hope you find something useful in that, whether you are interested in starting something new, changing up what you're currently doing. If you have a company, if you're self-employed, if you are thinking about starting something, one last tip, do not go with a sole proprietorship, do a corporation or an LLC. LLCs are easier to manage, but go with something that provides you with some kind of liability protection. Super important. Thanks for coming. Thanks for the opportunity to speak.